Most people don't realize when their life started slipping out of their control. There was no dramatic collapse. No single mistake. It happened quietly, in fragments. One notification. One glance at the phone. One unfinished thought. One task. Abandoned halfway. And slowly, without noticing, attention stopped belonging to them. You sit down to work and your mind jumps ahead. You try to study and your hand reaches for the screen before you even decide to. You start something meaningful and end up somewhere else entirely. Not because you are weak. Not because you are broken. But because you were never taught how to guard your attention. That is the real crisis of the modern world. Not lack of intelligence. Not lack of opportunity. But the inability to stay with one thing long enough for depth to form. Before we go further, if you are tired of being mentally scattered, tired of starting days strong and ending them empty, subscribe now. This channel is not about hacks. It is about reclaiming control. Distraction today is so normal that people mistake it for personality. They say, this is just how my brain works. But that belief is dangerous because it removes responsibility. It convinces you that drifting is natural and focus is unnatural. The truth is more uncomfortable. Focus was once essential to survival. Distraction is the new environment, not the default state. Your ancestors lived with fragmented attention because it kept them alive. They listened for danger. They scanned for movement. But when the danger disappeared, the habit remained. And in a world of constant stimuli, that habit turns against you. Every notification pulls you out of the present. Every switch between tasks forces the brain to reset. Research shows it can take more than 20 minutes to return to full focus after a single interruption. Now multiply that by the number of times you break your attention in a day. That is not productivity loss. That is identity erosion. Because what you give your attention to repeatedly becomes your life. The Japanese understood this long before neuroscience put numbers to it. In Zen monasteries, there's a concept called Ichigyo-Zammai. It means one. Action, complete absorption. Doing one thing at a time with total presence, as if you and the action are not separate. This is not time management. It is mind management. Ichigyo-Zammai does not ask you to do more. It asks you to stop dividing yourself. When you study, you study. When you eat, you eat. When you work, you work. No background noise, no mental commentary. No parallel worlds running in your head. To the modern mind, this sounds simple, almost trivial. But simplicity is deceptive. Because nothing feels more uncomfortable to a distracted mind than staying fully present. Most people don't struggle with focus because tasks are difficult. They struggle because presence is unfamiliar. Silence feels threatening. Stillness exposes how restless the mind really is. That is why distraction feels like relief. It allows escape from the discomfort of being fully here. The Zen approach does not fight distraction aggressively. It does not shame the wandering mind. When attention drifts, the practitioner simply notices and returns, again, and again, and again. No drama, no frustration. Just repetition. This is how control is built. There's a reason people can spend hours immersed in video games or random content and feel no effort at all. They enter a state of flow unintentionally. Time dissolves. Self-consciousness disappears. Ichigyo-Zammai is learning to enter that state deliberately without needing stimulation. This is where discipline changes meaning. Discipline is not forcing yourself through pain. It is removing friction that pulls you away. It is designing conditions where focus becomes inevitable. Most people rely on willpower. They sit down with 10 tabs open, phone vibrating beside them, and then blame themselves for failing to concentrate. That is not lack of discipline. That is lack of structure. The Japanese approach starts with the environment. One task visible, everything else removed, no negotiation. no temptation nearby. Attention is treated as something fragile, worth protecting, because attention is not infinite. It is a resource. And whatever drains it controls you. Ichigyo-Zammai teaches that distraction is not the enemy. It is a signal that the mind is tired, overstimulated, or afraid of difficulty. When you understand this, you stop fighting yourself and start working with reality. You stop asking, why can't I focus? And start asking, what am I allowing to pull me away? This shift alone changes everything. People think success comes from talent or intelligence. But talent without attention collapses. Intelligence without presence scatters. What remains is unfinished work and unrealized potential. The ability to give full attention to a single action is rare today. And anything rare becomes valuable. Those who can stay with one thing while others drift will always move ahead quietly, not because they rush, but because they go deep. Ichigyo-Zammai is not about speed. It is about depth. And depth is where results compound. Most people skim their own lives. They eat without tasting. They listen without hearing. They work without engaging. Then they wonder why days feel empty and years disappear. Presence restores weight to time. When you are fully present, even ordinary actions feel complete. Even effort feels clean. Even boredom becomes tolerable. This is not mysticism. It is training. Every time you bring attention back, you strengthen the neural pathways responsible for control. The mind becomes steadier. The pull of distraction weakens, not instantly, but inevitably. This is why Ichigyo-Zammai is not a technique you try once. It is a way you live. It begins with work and ends with life. If you master your attention, you master the doorway through which everything else enters. Skill, learning, discipline, peace. Without attention, nothing grows. This is where the path begins. The real enemy of focus is not technology itself, but the way it fragments identity. Every time attention jumps, a small fracture forms. One fracture is harmless. Thousands create a life that feels scattered even when nothing is technically wrong. This is why people feel exhausted without doing anything difficult. Their energy is leaking through constant switching. Ichigyo-Zammai addresses this at the root, not by forcing concentration, but by restoring unity. One mind, one action. When attention stops splitting, effort stops feeling heavy. Most people believe they are tired because work is hard. In reality, they are tired because their mind is never fully where their body is. Half of them is working. The other half is elsewhere. This internal division drains more energy than the task itself. This is why short periods of deep focus feel strangely refreshing. You are not multitasking your own existence anymore. But here is the uncomfortable truth. The first stage of Ichigyo-Zammai feels worse, not better. When distractions are removed, the mind panics. It reaches for stimulation like an addict reaches for relief. Thoughts become louder. Urges become stronger. Boredom feels almost physical. This is not a sign of failure. It is the withdrawal phase. Most people quit here and conclude that focus. Listen for them. The samurai and Zen monks expected this stage. They knew that a mind trained on stimulation reacts violently when stimulation is removed. That reaction is not your enemy. It is proof of how deeply conditioned distraction has become. Ichigyo-Zammai does not ask you to suppress this discomfort. It asks you to observe it without obeying it. The moment you stop negotiating with every urge, something shifts. The mind learns that it does not control behavior. Attention returns not because you force it, but because you stop feeding escape. This is why the practice is gentle but ruthless. You do not yell at yourself. You do not dramatize failure. You simply return, again, and again. And again. Each return strengthens control. The story of Jake illustrates this clearly. His breakthrough did not happen because he suddenly became motivated or disciplined. It happened because he stopped allowing his environment to decide for him. Phone removed, notifications off, one tab, one task. A clear ritual. Ritual is critical. Without ritual, focus depends on mood. With ritual, focus becomes automatic. The body learns that certain actions signal immersion: sitting down, clearing the desk, breathing, beginning. Over time, these cues bypass resistance. This is not willpower. This is conditioning. Ichigyo-Zammai treats attention like a muscle. Short repetitions, clean execution, rest without stimulation. Gradual increase in capacity. The Pomodoro structure works not because of time management, but because it respects cognitive limits while training depth. During focus blocks, attention is absolute. During breaks, presence remains. No phone, no mental noise. Just recovery. This teaches the brain that rest does not require escape. Most people sabotage their focus by poisoning their breaks. They overload the nervous system and wonder why returning feels impossible. Ichigyo-Zammai restores rhythm as Jake practiced. Something subtle changed. His mind stopped racing ahead. He stopped living in imagined futures and unfinished narratives. He became present enough to act. And action, when repeated consistently, compounds faster than dreaming ever will. This is why his grades rose without heroic effort. He was not smarter. He was more available. His attention stopped bleeding out. What people call talent is often just uninterrupted focus. Over time, science eventually caught up with what Zen had known for centuries. Focused attention reshapes the brain. The prefrontal cortex strengthens. The default mode network quiets. Mental noise decreases. Clarity increases, but science misses the deeper implication. When attention stabilizes, identity stabilizes. You stop feeling scattered because you stop living in fragments. This is why Ichigyo-Zammai extends beyond work. Eating becomes eating. Walking becomes walking. Conversation becomes presence. Life regains texture. Distraction flattens experience. Presence restores depth. Most people believe happiness comes from adding more to life. Ichigyo-Zammai reveals that happiness often comes from subtracting noise. When you are fully present, even ordinary moments feel complete. You stop rushing toward the next thing, because the current thing finally has weight. This is why people who master attention appear calm. Not because their lives are easier, but because their minds are not divided. Jake's transformation continued, because he applied the principle everywhere. Tests, projects, conversations, code. One thing. Total attention. No inner commentary, no mental multitasking. This consistency gave him an unfair advantage. While others burned energy fighting distraction, he conserved it. While others panicked under pressure, he entered focus. While others relied on bursts of motivation, he relied on structure. Consistency beats intensity when intensity cannot be sustained. Ichigyo-Zammai reveals a truth modern culture avoids. You do not need more time, you need less division. You do not need more tools, you need fewer interruptions. You do not need to be smarter, you need to be present. Attention is the gatekeeper of everything you want to improve. Learning, skill, discipline, peace. Without it, nothing sticks. With it, even average ability becomes powerful. Most people chase productivity techniques. Samurai and monks trained attention itself. One produces surface efficiency. The other produces mastery, and mastery always looks quiet from the outside. This practice does not promise comfort. It promises clarity. It does not make life easier. It makes life coherent. When you reclaim your attention, you reclaim authorship of your own actions. You stop reacting. You start directing. And direction is the foundation of any meaningful path. This is what Ichigyo-Zammai offers. Not a trick, not a hack. A return to unity in a fragmented world, and for those willing to stay with the discomfort long enough. It changes everything. Attention is the most underestimated force shaping a human life. Not intelligence, not talent, not opportunity. Attention. Whatever holds it repeatedly becomes your direction. And direction, followed long enough, becomes destiny. Most people never choose theirs. It is chosen for them by noise, urgency, habit, and convenience. Ichigyo-Zammai is the decision to stop drifting. What makes this path difficult is not the practice itself, but what it exposes. When distraction falls away, you meet yourself without filters. The restlessness, the impatience, the fear of stillness, the urge to escape when effort becomes quiet. This is why most people avoid deep focus. Not because they can't do it, but because it removes the stories they use to avoid responsibility. Ichigyo-Zammai leaves no room for excuses. When you do one thing with full attention, results become honest, progress becomes measurable, failure becomes clear. And clarity can be uncomfortable, but clarity is also liberating. Because once you see the truth of your effort, improvement becomes straightforward. This is where modern culture misleads people. It teaches them to manage symptoms instead of causes. Productivity tools, motivation videos, endless optimization, all trying to fix outcomes without fixing attention. But no system survives a divided mind. No plan executes itself. Attention is the engine behind every method that ever worked. The samurai and Zen practitioners did not try to eliminate distraction by fighting the world. They trained the mind to return. Return is the key word. Not force, not suppression, return. Every time attention wandered, it came back, calmly, without judgment. Over time, wandering lost its power. This is how strength is built quietly. When you practice Ichigyo-Zammai long enough, something subtle happens. You stop feeling pulled in multiple directions. Decisions simplify. Priorities clarify. You no longer feel busy but empty. You feel engaged or resting, working or stopping. There is less overlap, less leakage. Life stops feeling rushed even when you are doing a lot. Because rushing comes from division, not activity. This is why Jake's story matters. Not because he got into a prestigious institution. That was a byproduct. What mattered was that he stopped living in imagination and started living in execution. Dreams stopped replacing action. Attention replaced anxiety. He learned that discipline is not about forcing yourself to endure misery. It is about arranging your life so focus becomes natural. Clean environment, clear ritual, defined boundaries. One task, full presence. This approach scales to anything. Learning a language, building a skill, creating something meaningful, leading others, even relationships. When you give someone undivided attention, they feel it. When you give your work undivided attention, quality follows. When you give your life undivided attention, meaning emerges. Most people feel their days disappear because they are never fully inside them. Ichigyo-Zammai restores ownership of time by restoring ownership of attention. You stop watching your life pass by and start inhabiting it. There's no finish line to this practice. Jake understood that. Getting accepted was not the end. Promotion was not the end. Mastery is not a destination. It is a way of moving through the world, one thing at a time. With care, this mindset protects you from burnout because it removes unnecessary mental load. You are not juggling identities. You are not rehearsing futures while avoiding the present. You are doing what is in front of you fully, then letting it go. That is a rare form of peace. Science confirms the mechanics, but it cannot capture the experience. When attention stabilizes, the mind quiets. When the mind quiets, perception sharpens. When perception sharpens, life feels richer without adding anything new. Food tastes better. Conversations deepen. Work becomes cleaner. Time stretches. This is not because life changed. It is because you arrived. Most people think presence is passive. It is not. It is the most active state a human can occupy. It requires restraint, commitment, and humility. Humility to accept that you can only do one thing well at a time. Multitasking flatters the ego. Presence builds reality. Ichigyo-Zammai does not make you faster immediately. It makes you accurate. And accuracy compounds into speed. Over time, it does not make you look impressive. It makes you effective. And effectiveness eventually speaks louder than performance. This path is simple. That is why it is rare. There is nothing to collect, nothing to show off, no shortcut to brag about. Only daily return to what matters. Most people want transformation without structure. Ichigyo-Zammai offers structure without spectacle. And for those willing to stay with it, results become inevitable. If you feel scattered, you don't need a new personality. You need fewer interruptions. If you feel stuck, you don't need more motivation. You need deeper presence. If you feel overwhelmed, you don't need to do less. You need to stop dividing yourself. One thing. Full attention. Repeated daily. This is how attention becomes power. And power, when controlled, becomes freedom. This path is not for everyone. Many will hear it and return to noise. That is fine. But if you are done being pulled apart by distractions, done starting and stopping, done watching potential dissolve into scrolling, then stay. Subscribe. This channel exists to train attention, discipline, and inner control in a world designed to steal all three.